Hello, legendary listeners, and welcome to the Legendary Ladies podcast. This week, we are here to discuss the thing that A, we've all been waiting to discuss for a while, and B, we know you, our listeners, have been waiting for us to discuss. The live action Avatar The Last Airbender was released yesterday, and Kat Morgan and I all watched the pilot. And we are here because we have thoughts. What thoughts are there have been thoughted? We're about to find out. But before we were recording, apparently I'm the one who's like, everybody wants, like, these two want to know what I'm thinking.
But why? How are you surprised by this, Amy? I don't know a bigger Avatar fan than you. So
It's true.
That is true. So everybody share your history. Morgan, what's your history with Avatar The Last Airbender, the animated series, or the M. Night Shyamalan disaster?
Oh, I did not watch the M. Night Shyamalan movie. I've heard enough about it to feel like I'm good. It's not something that like I need to experience in my life, although who knows, maybe one day I'll just be like, let's put this on, but I doubt it. I did not come to Avatar. I came to Avatar because of you guys, actually, because
Really?
on this podcast, you guys mentioned it so often.
I remember that.
You would like,
I do now.
I feel like in the early seasons of Legends, you'd be like, just like on Avatar, and I'd be like, what? Like the Blue People movie? And you're like, no, like the animated show. And you guys talk so much about how good it was. And I think it ended up being like a pandemic watch for us where we were like stuck inside. And I was like, you know what? This feels like the perfect time to like just kick it and watch Avatar. And the first couple episodes of the first season, I remember being like a little tough for me because it felt young. Like parts of the first
kiddier.
parts of that first season felt like it was aimed at a lot of a younger audience. Bunsen, my cat, agrees with that as well. That's why he has to be here in this recording. But
yeah,
as
and if you were on our
Amy's as if you were honoring something.
I think she was going to say,
Thrown
if
at-
you were a Patreon supporter like Rachel and Danny in the chat, you get to watch these as they happen live and get to say hello to Bunsen in the chat. Bunsen is a big fan and always reads the chats. So obviously you would be able to communicate with him in real time. But yeah. So as the first season went along, though, it just got better and better. And then seasons 2 and 3, like Avatar is such a good show. So I do, but I credit you guys. You guys are the ones who got me to watch it.
I'm happy that you did eventually watch it. I feel like it's fresher in your brain because I guess that transitions to me watching Avatar. But I watched Avatar a lot as a kid out of order, like just like, oh, there's a random episode of Avatar, that's cool. But I was never like a huge Avatar fan until Korra came out. And I was like, oh, I guess I'll try this show, but I'm not like the biggest Avatar fan. Like I would watch it every once in a while. And then I watched Korra. I'm like, wow, I really do like this world. I'll go back and like kind of watch Avatar more in order. So then I got to watch more Avatar. But yeah, I've always been more of a Korra fan, and I did not watch the M. Night Shyamalan movie. I don't feel like I have to. And yeah, no, I like Avatar. But I also like. I think also something to mention, and I feel like I mentioned this in previous podcasts. I'm not a fan of adaptations and remakes. If that adaptations for comics, whatever, but especially remakes of things that I've seen before. How can you do it again? And just tell me the same thing. Like I've seen it before. I honestly don't even like rewatch television shows that often or movies just because I don't like watching the same things over and over again. Give me some new material. I know.
To be fair, I don't reread things all that often. Like if I'm rereading something, it's like my absolute favorite thing on earth. Otherwise, I'm like, well, there's so many books out there. There's so many books I need to get to. So I guess I get that. I do tend to rewatch stuff, but I actually kind of agree with the remakes and the reboots. Maybe I would have argued with this a couple years ago, but I feel like now there's so many remakes, there's so many reboots, like nothing is original. It feels like that I do kind of get. I feel like I have remake and reboot fatigue. Like I'm just like, oh, cool, like another reboot.
That's my problem with most of this in general. Is it feels like the world has been oversaturated with remakes, and it's just definitive. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like if someone decided, hey, let's make an HBO series where we're going to remake Aragon. Yes, absolutely. The movie was crap. There's new
And
books
also was
coming
like
out.
5,000 years ago, I feel. It was like
5,000
early
years ago.
2000s.
Oh, yeah.
This is, I mean, for a lot of people, the animated Avatar: The Last Airbender series is gosh darn near perfect.
Mhm.
Yes.
And so how do you remake perfect? And just to kind of give the listeners my history of the show, I watched the show when it was airing. I watched, I picked it up between season 1 and 2. Like I was a kid and I watched season 2, and then season 3 became an affair with my friends. Like we would have watch parties, the finales. And I remember I have one friend, Taylor, she was a dancer. She actually had a whole choreographed opening for the title sequence at the beginning that she would dance it while we were going. And we would like, we were cheering or screaming or shouting or hooing and hawing whenever the episodes came out.
Earth.
Like she had, and she was an excellent dancer. She had a whole interpretive dance for the opening sequence. And then I watched it when I was a kid, remembered how much I loved it, went back and rewatched it. I think also a rewatch pandemic watch, and absolutely fell in love with it again. Like and then I tried picking up Korra and it didn't have the same magic for me. So I think that's
Had
the challenge
better magic.
Yeah. No. Morgan's watching us just like duke it out over here.
I think it's funny because I'm like the middle ground between both of your opinions on Korra and Avatar, where I'm like, I kind of think that Avatar overall was a better show, but I think that Korra starts stronger and kind of maintains. So I think like Avatar hits the higher highs, but Korra is like more consistent throughout.
And honestly, for me, and obviously you can make a whole nother podcast about this, so we won't go too long on it, but I think Korra is the better lead. I think she's a more flawed character. I'm not saying Aang's not. There's things we'll actually talk about in this pilot that does that Phil pointed out to me, my business partner. But yeah, no, I just think Korra is I like her development. I think her character development is very interesting. I
was here for the Zuko character development. Like that, this might have been my introduction to like the bad boy turned good trope. The quote the kind of sort of enemies to lovers, but it's not really. It's like the bad guy become like the redemption arc. Like this was formative trope forming for me as a kid.
I do want to read off Rachel and Danny's comments here. So Rachel said remakes should be for shows and movies that weren't good, and Danny says I started with Korra because my college students raved about it. But I do want to mention about Rachel's because I agree. And I think it's for shows that like could have made it better in some way. Like Scott Pilgrim's a really good example. I don't think we talked about it on this podcast, but I watched the movie. I'd never read the comics, surprisingly enough, but I didn't love the movie. I know a lot of people love the movie when they grew up with it, but it's not my favorite thing in the world. I think it's just fine. But I watched the anime. I was like, oh, this makes sense to me because it's adapting a comic, so animation always works a little bit better with comics, and B, they changed the story to make it modern. Like this Avatar is a pretty modern story already, so like what do you do to change it? You're just gonna make it worse.
I really agree with Rachel, and I actually read a review of the new Avatar live action by Alan Sepinwall on like Rolling Stone, and that was kind of his point too, is like it's fine, but it's not necessary. Like the superior version already exists, and like no matter if you're making a remake of something that is like universally beloved, like the best you can do is be like the fine version. Like you're probably you're never gonna be. It was my exact issue with Mean Girls, is that I was sitting in the theater thinking, I feel like I would rather be watching the original Mean Girls. Like what am I doing here? And I think there are examples of like you said, Scott Pilgrim, that could be done better in like a different format. I was thinking
or a different era.
Yeah, I was thinking of the example that Alan Sepinwall used in his article, which is Battlestar Galactica. The the sci-fi version of Battlestar Galactica was very, very good. The original version, I haven't seen it, And I'm sure it has its benefits, but it's a very different story.
That's an excellent example. 12 Monkeys is another case. It's based off the
Yeah.
Bruce Willis show, or the Bruce Willis
Movie,
movie,
yeah.
which
Did not
is
know that.
entirely forgettable. But the TV show takes on its own life and its own story. I remember reading a review similar to you, Morgan, where for this show, you know, the live action Avatar, The Last Airbender, and they bring up something that I think kind of defines what I have seen so far, just the pilot. And it's the idea that it's just frustrating enough that the changes that they make don't actually affect the overall flow of the story. They don't affect the end game of a character's development. They just don't hit the mark because they were changes that didn't need to be made. And so you as a fan go, okay, you know, that's okay. Like that's not bad. I see why they did it, I guess.
But what does it
did
add?
Need to do it.
Yeah.
And that can be
the
really
elephant in the room. What they changed in this episode was, so the first 20 minutes is not what the pilot is. It's, you know, how did Aang go in the 100 years of him being, what would you call it, frozen? What would you call it?
Yeah,
when he was 100 years being frozen.
He becomes a popsicle.
So he was frozen for 100 years, and like, all right, so what happened before that? And a part, and I'm sure Amy's going to mention a bit more, is that they kind of change Aang's perspective of, well, his journey, right? Because instead of him running away out of fear, he kind of runs away out of circumstance. So that kind of happens and kind of changes his motives and changes his character a little bit, even though it feels a little harmless of what those 20 minutes are. And then the rest of the show is kind of the pilot. It's kind of what you already saw with the animated show. But there's also these little things because again, I haven't watched Avatar in a while, and I was talking to my friends Julius and Phil. I was like, am I wrong, or is Sokka more serious than he usually is, or did I misremember? Did he feels like he has more responsibilities? And I'm like, that kind of feels weird to me. So I thought that was a little weird. I thought Katara was a little bland. You know, I don't know. It's a weird. So let's talk about the beginning. So one thing I also want to talk about with the beginning is that I was watching it on my laptop at first. I was like doing other thing, and I was like, oh, let me watch it on my laptop. The visuals were so dark. I was like, I have to put on the television.
I thought it was my computer. I literally went and had to reset all of my light filters because I'm like, why is his face gray?
Oh,
and I
had
just the night before messed with them, so I thought maybe that was me. I'm glad
I feel like this is kind of a problem with like modern TV and movies where everything is getting like darker and darker. Everything looks a little bit like CGI sludge. Is how I usually call it. It's just like this thing where it almost looks like it's real, but you know it's not real, and it has this. It kind of looks like so like sometimes you feel like you're watching like a cutscene on a video game and not like a real live action thing.
That's
and I kind of hate it.
Great way to put it, Morgan. That's exactly what it feels like. It feels CGI shouldn't feel false, but you watch it and you go, wow, look, that's CGI. Like the snow in this episode. I'm sorry, I have a bone to pick with the snow of this episode. I just watched a Star Trek Enterprise episode that happened to take place in the snow. It was filmed in the late 90s. I'm pretty sure they had better fake snow than this show did. I don't know why this bothered me so much.
Yeah, I think
but it really did.
I think it's the difference between practical effects and like CGI, which is not to say that CGI can't be well done. Like we did a Lord of the Rings rewatch like a year or two ago, and like those movies hold up great, and there's lots of CGI in those. But yeah, there's just something about like, I feel like they've gone overboard on CGI and like modern film. And I feel like it's going to get worse too with AI stuff coming out. But yeah, it kind of gives it a weird, like tonal, like the colors are always really dark, and I'm always like, are my eyes busted, or is the TV busted?
Are we now old?
Am I old? Yeah.
I felt like the show in general felt really cheap, and I hate to say that, but specifically when the Air Nation, I think, is like talking to each other, they're like in this room and they're sitting, and I'm like, this set feels cheap. Like it just like was so barren, and I'm just like, this this just feels like a
They're-
CW show in some ways. Like it just, and it's weird because they have money, they have money for this show, but it's just like, it's so weird. And obviously we'll talk more about like our full opinions on the show, but this is such a hard show to talk about because it's not bad, but it's not good. And that's kind of how I continuously,
that is honestly my issue with the first episode. It's fine. It's fine. And that doesn't make you excited to keep watching. I mean, I'm going to keep watching. And we're going to talk about the full season, but yeah, it was, I was just like, okay.
It's like and eating at Olive Garden.
But when you're there, your family, Amy.
when you're eating at Olive Garden, the food is not great, but you also have delicious breadsticks and unlimited
That's what I was about to say. I was
and
like,
it's cheap.
So you get really good bread, and it's cheap. And you know what? You leave and you're like, I'm satiated. That was a good meal. I might go back and eat it again. But did I sit there and go, damn, that chicken Alfredo changed my life? No.
No one has ever said that about the Olive Garden.
No. it was sort of I'm sorry.
I was going to bring that up.
The breadsticks, or Rachel says.
It's the breadsticks. Actually, who was the breadsticks in this episode?
I think, weirdly enough, I was going to say Sokka, and I don't even think he was, because he at least nailed some jokes. When he was funny, he was funny. I think he did what he could. Well, one thing I wanted to mention is this actually brings into our pop culture too, is that Madam Web. I went to go see Madam Web. I'll be short.
Did you
went to see Madam Web? Oh yeah, I saw Madam Web.
Oh, I haven't seen it. A big part of me wants to, just because I know it's going to be bad. Is it like just an amazing movie going experience?
That's what I was going to mention. Yes. Because like certain movies, you're just like, man, that like Night Swim. And we talked about Night Swim, where I was like, that was bad. It was boring bad. It's just, there's nothing to laugh about. Madam Web, she's driving a taxi the whole entire movie, and the taxi follows her everywhere she goes. It's like they're in the forest, the taxi's there. I'm like, that's funny.
My favorite part of the Madam Web thing is just that the line that was in the trailer that everybody thought was so funny isn't in the movie, which I think is hilarious.
Funny.
But there's even better lines. The whole opening is almost like that trailer. The ADR doesn't match anyone's lips.
I have heard that like one of the characters, almost every one of his lines is like ADR'd in for some reason.
I don't know why.
So bad,
and it's like a bad sub.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. And why I think Avatar falters is that M. Night Shyamalan, I almost like praise, because at least it's laughably bad. We still talk about it because of it. It's a bad movie, and you have a fun time talking about it. This is so forgettable. That's almost worse than bad. I'd rather see Madam Web again than see this again, because there's nothing of note. There's nothing to make fun of. No, it's true. Yeah. There's nothing of note. There's nothing to make fun of, but then there's also nothing to praise.
So let's go. We got sidetracked, so let's go back to the beginning, because I actually this was definitive, I think, for the whole first episode. So you've got that change where they show that they show the thing that's not actually canon. You don't actually see someone stealing the Fire Nation plans and trying to deliver it to the Earth Kingdom and that's all Sozin's plan, or not Sozin.
The other guy,
not Ozai.
I'm so bad at
the one who originally started the war. The one who originally started the war. That's not actually canon, but it's there now. It might be in the comic books, but that whole thing.
Well, the comics are all pretty much after the
they
events.
Are, but unless they brought it up at some point.
Flat, yeah.
Maybe it was Sozin. Rachel says it was Sozin, but I think it was as well. I think it's because it's Sozin's comment. I'm pretty sure it's Sozin. Anywho, that whole sequence where they show the Air Nomads and you're like, oh damn, like we know what's coming, and you see the Aang's story develop initially as opposed to a flashback. I remember watching it and I go, oh, it's not bad. It's not a bad idea. Was I kind of surprised that they were willing to maybe show the reality that this becomes a massive genocide? Yes. Do I wish that if they had chosen to go that route, they really went for it? Yes. And
but
that's
the
what was
thing
missing for me.
But that's the thing about this series, it sounds like, is again, I've only seen the pilot. I only wanted to watch the pilot for this episode. But it seems like they want to do very serious topics, but not go full throttle. Because we know also that from just the internet, that Sokka's sexism is taken away because of they think that's more modern to do, but not understanding that's like his character development. But it's just like, yeah, like if you're going to do that, you're missing the point, but it's just like you're choosing topics that you're not fully developing.
Yeah, it felt like it was by like starting the pilot that way with the, you know, the genocide of the Air Nation. It felt like it was taking a much darker tone than the animated show was, at least especially in like the first season of the animated show. And I feel like even though, you know, they hit a lot of the same beats and things like that in this pilot as in like the first episode or two, it felt darker because, you know, we start on a very dark note with the characters. And so it does feel like this is maybe like a darker, more serious version of the story than the animated version. At least that's kind of the vibe I was getting from this first episode.
I just kind of wish that they had gone for it a little bit more, because I agree. And I think we already see it right away with Aang's character, which I'm not a huge fan of that change. I'm okay if they did this, the opening sequence. I was okay with that. I'm like, this is, you know, this is interesting to me. This is an interesting way to tell that story.
They're trying to do something different.
They're trying to do something different, but Aang is meant to be about light and life. That is what the Airbender Nation is. That's what the Air Nation is. That's what Aang is. Aang is all about, let's go penguin sledding. Like, I was so upset that they did not have that line, because it's iconic in the pilot of the animated series when Aang pops out of that popsicle that they're in. He's like, you guys want to go penguin sledding with me? And the fact that they didn't have that line and instead they just drag him back and everybody's like, oh, look, an airbender. And I was like, yes, you could tell because of his rather cheaply looking costume.
Well, and also that's something about, and you know, I don't know about the acting in general, but I think what's so hard to have these iconic roles that you're kind of used to seeing in animation, and then like these actors have to like reiterate them, and it's just like, well, are they going to really strike the chord that original show did? And I don't know if they do. You know, I think Sokka tries, I think Zuko tries, but there's nobody where I'm like, wow, that's something new, that's something different, that's great. And it's just so hard because all you could do is compare, and you're obviously gonna like the original more.
That's the problem, is you can't, if they're gonna do this, people are naturally gonna compare it. So I think you have to either go full off kilter and just completely make up your own story and be like, you know what, we're not doing any of that, M. Night Shyamalan status, or you have to have the same general characteristics. And I think the only character who actually fits that is Zuko. I think Zuko's rage that he has, and you know, there wasn't enough of the "it is my destiny" lines. He did have it in there, just like Katara had her hope lines in there about the hope for the future. I was like, oh, she better have a like, you're the hope of of the world like speech every episode. I'm gonna count it out. I really want to see one every episode. But Zuko's rage that drives him, I think that's the only thing that stayed consistent, and I think that's absolutely necessary, because we know that he goes from fueling his firebending with rage to learning how to fuel firebending through the way that he's taught from the Dragon Masters in the 3rd season. Like, that arc is crucial to Zuko's arc. The fact that we don't get a chance to see Aang going from fun little kid into weight of the world Aang is sad. That you don't get to see Sokka go from a girl's place is in the kitchen to a girl's place is on the battlefield is frustrating. Katara is about the same, I think, but the fact that
I thought she was just kind of boring. I don't know. I thought she was the weakest.
Yeah.
I thought she was the weakest.
I think she was kind of the
Agreed.
weakest, yeah, in this one.
And we're supposed to see her grow in her water bending. We're supposed to see her struggle really hard with her water bending.
She just kind of makes a puddle. And then
at the end, when they're flying away, she's like, water wall.
Right.
And I was like, oh, okay. And spoiler alert. Well, no spoilers. I'm not going to give it away. There's the next episode they bring up, they like full on skip 4 or 5 episodes of her character.
I heard.
In
I heard
30 seconds.
I heard they bring characters that don't even show up in this season.
Really?
Yeah, basically, I'm sorry. I'm just
how
gonna
many
spoil it.
how many have you watched, Amy?
I have watched 15 minutes of the second episode. Like
Uh-huh.
literally right
Okay.
away. Right away they bring it in. You know that the water bending scroll
Yeah.
that they search for like multiple episodes because she wants to learn how to be a waterbender.
Yes,
Her
I do remember that.
grand stuck it in her backpack.
Huh. Wow.
And so she opens her backpack
They had
and
to
she's
rush
like,
it.
look, a waterbending scroll. And Grand's note is like, it's time for you to embrace your destiny. Here is your scroll of instructions. And they're supposed to be like, it's a major episode where Katara chooses to put her life and the life of everybody who she's with in danger for this scroll. And it's a bummer to see them skip that, but they literally skip straight to Kyoshi.
So. I also heard that what's the name? The
Kyoshi
Warriors.
Kyoshi?
Yeah, they're in this like very early on. Which aren't they
already.
like?
I'm 15 minutes.
Yeah,
in.
they're not supposed to show up this early.
I think the challenge is that they're supposed to show up after Aang has made his way to the airbending temple, and that's supposed to take, I think, 3 to 4 episodes, but they accomplished it in 20 seconds. Like, it's not supposed to be, like, it's a long trip, y'all, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, they're there already? And this is what led me to my final kind of frustration with this episode, is we get to the Southern Air Temple, we see the destruction of his place or of his home. We see him enter the Avatar state, but we don't really fully understand why, and we don't understand how he gets out of it. And it's really critical to form the relationship between Katara and Aang, that she's able to pull him out of that desolate Avatar state that he enters, which is supposed to be built off of guilt. And the fact that he left and just was like, I'm gonna go flying because things are clearer to me in the air, as opposed to I'm gonna run away because I'm scared. That change is very drastic for me. And that's a little bit too much of a character change than I would have been okay with. But again, what are you going to do?
It seems like big Avatar fans feel that way. And I think what's interesting about this show, and we always access it every pilot pod, and also even Mean Girls we access.
Yeah.
Who is this for?
Yeah. I also struggled with the who is this for? Is it for super fans of the animated show who I think if you asked most fans of the animated show, they would say, I loved that show just the way it was. Is it for people who might have liked the show but are just like unwilling to watch animation? I don't know. Like, is that big of an audience? I did also struggle with like, who is this for? Because for people who really loved the animated version, I feel like, and again, I haven't seen the whole season, just this first episode. I feel like you kind of come out of this first episode, and I just kind of thought, I feel like I want to go back and rewatch the animated version.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, do I need to watch more of this?
Yeah.
Well, also, I mean, obviously, if we look at how many people are talking about the show, I mean, we even have our patrons who are also in the comments talking about the show and excited about talking about the show. I won't say excited about the show, but it obviously did well. Like, people are watching it for a reason. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I found this audience.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if maybe part of who they think it's for is people who watched the animated show when they were younger and are older now and are like more likely to watch something in live action, or are older now and are like, yeah, I'd love to revisit that thing that I was obsessed with when I was younger, and they're just kind of trading on nostalgia. And like, to be honest, like, it feels like most entertainment right now is just straight up just trading on nostalgia in various ways anyway. So it feels to me mostly like a nostalgia play. Like, they're like, you know what people like is Avatar.
Netflix also, and I have not watched it, I just heard this from other people, but Netflix had One Piece, right? The show that did very well for them.
And Cowboy Bebop before that, which they canceled.
That did very badly for them. People really hated Cowboy Bebop. But also the one season
I didn't watch
show.
That one. Yeah, I didn't watch that one. I missed that one. But I did love the original Cowboy Bebop anime. So I was a little bit like, ooh, am I going to like this? But I hear good things about the One Piece.
What I hear is interesting about that show is because One Piece is thousands of hours of content, and I think it's still on. It's just like, it's a very long show, and they said it actually was good they condensed things because you get to things quicker, where it like there's a lot of filler episodes in the anime, so that's why the live action is giving you something. There are no filler episodes in Avatar, and when they are, they're like there for a reason. So it's just like,
I think
that also is weird.
The filler episodes in Avatar are great. They're just like fun episodes. I see Danny in the chat said, I'm clearly in the minority. I really liked it, and I'm a fan of the animated show.
You know what's such a interesting thing, Danny, too, is that I do not hate this show. Again, it's exactly what I said earlier. I don't hate it.
It's so funny. Yeah. I feel like we've been ragging on it for like probably like the past like 20 minutes, but I think we all liked it. We all liked it okay. Like,
I'm watching the next episode.
Yeah, I don't think any of us hated it. We're all planning, I think, to watch the full season. So,
but I want to hate it. I want to hate it or love it, and that's what I'm disappointed by.
Yes, I agree. I want to have a strong feeling about it, and I'm just sort of like, it's fine.
And that's the challenge, is that we can't help but compare. You cannot help but compare, especially like the three of us who have watched it relative as adults again. Like, you can't help but compare and hear, like, Rachel brings up the Gran recited that opening monologue. Now, Rachel said, because I did feel nostalgic hearing it, but I could also see people thinking it was awkward or cheesy. I thought it was awkward.
Oh, really? I thought I didn't have an opinion. I thought it was fine. Again, I didn't have, let's hear it, a strong opinion.
I also thought it was awkward, but I did start reciting along with her. I was like,
me too. Well, I started at the beginning, and I was like, oh, they changed it.
I expected it to be in the beginning, right? So that's why I was like, okay, here comes the opening narration, and what?
You know what else it struck me as I was watching it is I've had the privilege of working with a lot of really spectacular young actors and youth actors in the last year or so. And there are some really good kid actors that I work with locally in San Diego. And some of the acting for the kids in this episode was a little stiff, was very, I'm going to say my line because I'm going to say my line because I have a line written here, so I'm going to say the line. And we have to be forgiving because it's young actors. And I remembered thinking to myself, ooh, you're starting to drive me a little bit nuts, but I expect to see this actor grow. I expect to see the characters grow. You look at something like Game of Thrones and man, they grew. You look at where Sansa was in season 1 and where she ends. Yeah, they're gonna learn as they grow. We have to remember that most of the voice actors for the kids in the animated show were adults voice acting kids. Their pacing and their emotional beats are going to hit different because they have the emotional maturity to know how to hit that beat as opposed to being told how to hit that beat. And so there are some things that were lacking, I think, in creating connection for me with the younger actors because of that reality that they are actually having young kids play the role. It also struck me at one point, I was like, dang, Aang is really short compared to Katara. What happens when the actor grows? I was like, what happens when he gets really, really tall?
I have to say, I appreciate that they cast like age appropriate actors because it's one of the things that they do sometimes in Hollywood is they'll be like, look at this 14-year-old, and the camera will pan over to a 25-year-old, and you're like, I don't think that person is 14 at all. And in this one, I was like, yeah, that kid looks like he's 12. Like I buy that little kid could be younger than 12. I buy it. And I think that that's so refreshing to like not just have like a really hot like 25-year-old who's like, I'm 12.
and it's hard that for, going back to like maybe why I didn't connect with these kids is that it's hard because they do have to try to do these iconic roles, right? Like it's not like they're crafting their own characters. It's just like these characters are well crafted.
I wanted to bring up in the chat, Rachel says, cough, cough, Tom Welling in Smallville, cough, cough. And I will say that was one of the funnier things about Smallville, especially as it went along and his age gap between him and the character got more and more noticeable.
Yeah.
Where like the character would do something and he'd be like, oh, shucks, I'm just a 15-year-old from Kansas. And it's like a grown adult man who's like 30. And you're like, sir,
It's really
No.
hard. I am a 30. When I did Sleepy Hollow, I was a 32-year-old playing a written 17-year-old that we turned into a 19-year-old because teacher-student relationships were like, ew, can we at least make it consensual and legal? And it's really hard because there's like so much it's a big challenge playing a younger than 18-year-old. Like it's a lot. But I want to bring up Danny's comment. So this is why you guys, this is why we love having our patrons listen, because Danny in the chat is like, y'all keep saying you don't have a strong opinion, but you haven't talked about anything you liked. So
that is true.
Let's
talk about things we like.
Solid point.
It's so, because you want to just talk about all the things you don't like. It's hard because when you feel so neutral about something, you go lean towards the negative. I think that's what's really hard for me right now. Because again, I there's nothing that impressed me, but then again, there was nothing that I felt was critically bad besides how dark it was. That really was pretty. You know what? If I went to Olive Garden, especially as someone who lives in New York, I probably would say, man, I had a really strong opinions about this. Even if it's not the worst Italian food, I've had better Italian food in my life.
You come out of there
Chili's instead.
I would go to Chili's because I get buffalo wings. I'll go to Chili's. Yeah. At least I'm not getting pasta where I could get that 20 other places that it's better.
Is Zuko your buffalo wings?
Zuko is my buffalo wings. I'll have buffalo wings. Like, if someone just gave it to me and I didn't even know where they were from, I'll be like, I'll take them. I'm pretty sure the one time we had a meal together before Morgan's wedding, you got buffalo wings. I'm pretty sure.
I wouldn't be surprised. For Kat.
Yeah, I love my buffalo wings with all my heart. More than this show. I have strong opinions on my buffalo wings.
I would say, I thought the actor who played Sokka was very good.
I agree.
In terms
of his
comedic
timing was
good.
His
comedic timing was really good. He felt like he had like a level of like charisma when he was in scenes that he was like bringing something, like kind of bringing some life into the scenes, especially when things got a little bit, I don't want to use like the word boring, but a little slower in some of like the earlier sections. So like getting Sokka in there and having like a little bit of like comedic relief, I think was really good. And the way that they used him.
And I don't think the bending was bad. It's interesting because, again, you look at the M. Night Shyamalan stuff and you look at this, it's like, yeah, I think it's passable bending, you know?
Yeah, I thought that the bending stuff was pretty good, too. I thought that the air bending was probably the most questionable CGI-wise of the bendings. Like, when he was up in the air, I remember saying out loud, like, thank God for the production budget that like he's the last airbender, because I don't think that they could afford all of the airbending effects and having like the people flying in the air. They'd be like, oh my God, there would just be one episode and it would be 10 minutes. But I thought like the earth bending you see at the beginning was really cool. And the fire bending, I mean, fire stuff is usually pretty cool, but some of the stuff that Katara was like trying to do with the water was also, I think it was pretty well done, the bending overall.
I know that when they made the animated series, they worked really hard to create bending styles that matched with different types of martial arts. And if you guys ever get a chance to go back and look at the history of that, they actually, and I do not have the knowledge to tell you which one goes with which, but they have specific martial arts connected to specific bending abilities. So if you actually look at the way
I think that Amy
hold themselves physically, it's different for
you're breaking up just a little bit, Amy.
And now she looks shocked about it.
A lot, bitch.
I think Amy was saying that the different bending has different martial arts attached. And
which I actually did you know that?
I think in the back of my head I did, because you could see it looks different. Like if you look, I know a little bit about, I have a black belt. I know a little bit about martial arts.
You know a little bit about karate.
I know a little bit. But it starts with a T, the one that's airbending related. But you could tell that there's different styles, because one's like more flowy, and one's more like more, I don't want to say jarring, but I guess jarring is the word. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, that is cool how they I'm Amy dropped out, but I'm hoping she will be right back. But I think that the way that they did the air bending, or all of the bending was cool. And I liked that we kind of started with it like a fun action sequence. Like I think actually all the action sequences in this first episode were really solid.
Yeah, no, I do too. I think and Amy is back. But no, I think the action sequence was good.
I'm so bummed. I don't know where it cut me off. By the way, I will
Pretty much all the martial arts stuff.
No.
Do you know
my
which ones
Wi-Fi
with
is
their...
actually great.
I think
You can
it's
fool us.
I think it's StreamYard too.
StreamYard has been rebelling against Rebecca and I over on Supergirl Radio as well. So
did you hear that,
know.
StreamYard?
StreamYard, you're on notice. Amy, do you know what like the different bending, like what martial arts schools that they're like sort of based off of?
So I don't have enough knowledge to know which martial arts connects to which particular one. Yeah, you actually I know that it's there. I know that history is written in Google, or I know they've done videos on it before. But I think that they translated.
That's what I thought. Tai Chi is the one that's waterbending. It wasn't airbending. I knew Tai Chi was one of them.
Tai Chi was
Hungar is earthbending. The Northern Shulan, I think you pronounce the system, forms a basis of fire bending.
Shaolin, I believe. Or
Shaolin, there you go.
I'm probably also wrong, but I said it with confidence.
Baga Hong forms of the basis of airbending. Oh, and then pro bending, which this I did know, is heavily influenced by like MMA, UFC. So
yeah, cool. They worked really hard when creating the animated series to have a very consistent flow for how their bending looked, and I think that it's very clear that the stunt coordinators and whoever was putting together the fight and action sequences worked hard to make sure that they incorporated that in this live action. Like Katara's water bending is very different than the way that the firebenders are working in the earthbender. So I think it's really impressive. I thought that was really well done. I thought the effects most of them were good. There were some moments where I was like, oh, that clearly looks like a sky bison that's been stickered onto a background.
You should watch Madam Web. The CGI is a lot worse.
It could be worse. I thought Appa was cute. I liked Appa.
I thought Appa
I do think that we saw Appa mostly in like various close-ups. Like they were like, we don't have a budget for all of Appa. We have a budget for like half of Appa. So like let's just show his little face. But
if I remember, he didn't fly that much.
He flew a couple of times. Because they rescue Aang at the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the whole storm.
In the storm, that's right.
Remembered. Danny says in the Avatar movie, it took 6 earthbenders to move a tiny rock slowly.
Yeah, this one, at least they've got that down. So I thought that was really well done. I do appreciate that they wrote this episode to be a potential introduction for someone who's never actually seen Avatar: The Last Airbender. They get on all the info you need to know. They make sure you understand the 4 nations. They make you understand how they used to live together.
The war too. The war is pretty complicated, if I'm being honest, and I think they did a good job of making you, especially honestly, those first 20 minutes helps you understand the war maybe a little bit better.
And that was something that I genuinely, I finished that sequence. I go, I really didn't mind that. Even though it's different than what we were planning, I think that the overall flow of the episode worked really well. I don't think there were points where there were a little bit,
especially because an hour, it has to be an hour, not 20 minutes.
Yeah, I don't think it slogged too terribly bad at all. And I appreciate Danny in the comments says we even saw some lady airbenders. Agreed.
That was
cool. We got a chance to get some more history of the airbenders. And again, if they're going to take this and that Aang is a little bit more of a serious guy, then, connecting us, the audience, with his lost past is a way to kind of get us in his head.
I think being able to like meet his mentor and like see what his what the airbenders were like before they are all wiped out kind of does give you more of an emotional connection to it. Like by the time Aang gets there in the animation, and I could be wrong, but I think you kind of know him. It's a couple episodes in. So you're sad for him because you like Aang and you really care about Aang. But like, because they decided to do this in episode 1, I think if we hadn't seen that flashback, if we hadn't started in the past, that emotional moment of him, you know, really losing it wouldn't have hit so hard because we would just be like, who are these people, you know?
I just
on.
wished that they had done one of two things. That they had either kept him running away. I think that him just being like, I'm gonna go flying versus him running away, that change really affects his reaction to going back to the air temple. That I wish that they had not changed. Or, this is gonna sound really dark, I wish that they had actually showed more bodies. I wish that they had shown like an entire nation of skeletons, or that he had seen Gyatso and then gone and seen the kids who were very clearly killed after that. Like, I think that Aang walking in and seeing literally the friends that he would have remembered seeing less than a couple days before. Like, that's the other thing. You got to remember, this kid has been frozen in time. He literally remembers seeing all of this very recently. And so this should really hit him in the gut. And I wish that they had either kept that moment where he ran, or they really hyped it up, which they couldn't because it's PG. But again, who are we writing this for? Who's the audience? And that makes it challenging when we're like, okay, are they going to go for it or are they not going to go for it? Are they? But they're kind of not.
I also wonder where the show's gonna go, right? Like, does Netflix have the 3-season plan? Well, probably less than 3 seasons with how quickly they're going through the episodes. But it's like, yeah, what's their plan for after this? Because also, what is Netflix's greater plan? Because a lot of their original shows don't exist anymore. A lot of their shows now are things based on other IPs, like the Squid Games reality show, the One Piece. You have now Avatar. Like, they're big. Wednesday. They're really an IP farm where
Wednesday
Netflix
is actually
wasn't. And yeah, and obviously there are some One Piece and Wednesday, from what I hear, a lot of people like. But it's not what Netflix was. Netflix was the Orange is the New Black streaming service, like all these original content.
I'm going to go ahead and say, I feel like Amy's about to make a really great point, which is like, if they're going to make new Avatar, why not adapt some of the comics that
people go crazy. The search, I mean, people, like, if they finally adapted that, they adapted Korra and Asambi's relationship, people will go crazy, which we know they are doing. I don't know if Netflix is doing it, but I know Avatar Studios are planning on doing more Avatar stuff. That has to do with like the future, like after the series of things. So I think it is in the pipeline. I just don't know if it's a Netflix thing.
I think if this series, I don't want to say if it does well. I don't know, because
it already did do well.
It's gonna do it. Like, if this series does what they want it to do, I think.
But don't you think it did already?
I guess.
I mean, well, Netflix is never going to release their numbers, so that's.
But like the way people are talking about this,
it's got a lot of buzz. I will say it does feel like, in some ways, like a perfect Netflix show. In that Netflix tends to cancel their shows after about 3 seasons anyway. So I feel like it'll if they get past season 1 and do season 2, and I think that it'll probably end up at the very least having the full series on Netflix. I feel like if they get season 2, they might as well just do a season 3. It's only a 3-season story anyway.
And maybe they could pass what the animated show did in their 3rd season.
Yeah, and I see Danny in the chat. It kind of spoils us, but not really. I think we all kind of knew. So this season covers basically the first season of the animated show in 8 episodes, which kind of makes sense because the episodes are all like an hour, and all the animated episodes were like 20 minutes. So, and I think they condense.
I think there's only 13. How many are in that first season? I thought it was only 13. Maybe there's a lot more.
The first season is fewer episodes.
Yeah. I remember like 2 and 3, they had like a lot, but I feel like 1 was pretty short.
I feel like 2 and 3 had like almost 20.
Yeah. Another good question while we answer that, but Rachel does ask, would a live action Korra have worked better? I think it would have been easier that they were older, so that would help a little bit more with that. Maybe, the actors they could have chosen. And And also one thing we should mention is that it is cool that there's all Asian actors, and I think that's really fun to see for the show.
A little different from the M. Night Shyamalan one where they were
exactly
throwing
which
white people.
Asami was one of the person who voiced Asami is in that movie.
Really?
I didn't know that.
She's Katara, I believe.
that.
Yeah, the person who voices Asami is, I believe, Katara in that movie.
That's hilarious.
So she's in it. But anyways, Korra would have worked better. Maybe in some regards, fandom-wise, because people are split on Korra. So maybe the changes they would have made, people would have felt better about it.
I don't know about Korra. I think I could see this series doing a little bit like what they did with Witcher and do the Blood Origins route, and they go back and they tell the Kyoshi story because they've written these two gorgeous novels about Kyoshi. I could see them like, okay, well, Avatar did great. Now we're gonna do Kyoshi. Now we're
no one has a connection to it.
And I mean, realistically, they could if they do the first 3 seasons in. If they do the 3-season route, they could do the comics. They could keep going because there's a whole story there, and then they could make their way to Korra. So I don't know. I guess.
But are the animated projects going to be the comics? Because that's kind of the feeling I got. Because we do know the actual creators are working on animated projects, and it's coming out
because they left this one.
Yeah,
exactly.
I feel like we forgot to mention this, but yeah, they were originally the original creators of the animated show were attached to this Netflix project, and they left a couple of years ago, and they were like. We left over creative differences. Like they didn't say what they were, but they were pretty explicit that they were like, yeah, we didn't agree with like the direction that they were taking it. Anyway, peace.
I feel like it could have been Aang. I think that realistically, Sokka's changes, fine. He still had his like humorous beats. Zuko's pretty spot on. Iroh's pretty spot on. Katara's boring, but let's be honest, she is not. Well, the thing that made Katara the most interesting was her learning waterbending throughout the first season, or trying to learn waterbending. So the fact that they just skipped that whole character development can explain why she seems boring to us. But Aang's character changes. That's pretty drastic. That's like changing a golden retriever into a bloodhound. It's just too different.
And again, I think it kind of we're just basing it off of this first episode, so it remains to be seen how Aang, like, happy-go-lucky and kind of carefree and happy he is throughout the rest of the season. But I will say, based on the first episode, I agree with Amy. I think he's going to end up being kind of like a darker, more serious version of Aang. Like I think the core of Aang is still there, but it's a more serious Aang, and I could see that could be like feel like a major change to the creators.
Which is interesting because I don't know if I say it on this podcast enough, but I don't like whimsy that much. It's so interesting because the things that you mentioned about Amy, the things that you mentioned about Aang, like, oh, what are the penguins? Like, usually that would really annoy me. I hate whimsy. It's just not things that I enjoy. But I do think for Aang, it was like a character development thing because he's a kid, like he's a young kid. But I usually don't like that. So maybe I'll like serious Aang. I don't know. But I just like those jokes never make me laugh usually. I'm just like, oh yeah, that's kind of annoying, honestly. But not to Aang. I don't know why I don't feel that way about Aang. But like there's certain characters that have that vibe and I don't gel with them.
Do you know why it doesn't bother you with Aang?
Because he has the balance.
Character development from it becomes so pronounced. When you look at like the first few episodes, Aang versus there's one episode in season 3 where he can't sleep and he has insomnia because of the reality that he is striking, that he's going to have to kill someone. And he's literally going crazy. Like that is wild. That is the definition of like eldest child syndrome. The weight of the world literally is put on you. And so Kat, I don't think it bothers you as much because you get a chance to see him grow from it. What's interesting, Morgan, is I would argue that the core of Aang is not still there. I would argue we didn't get a chance to see any of Aang's whimsy because you didn't see him interacting with the kids. You didn't see him making an impulsive, childish decision to run away. You didn't get to see him even want to play with water bending.
You know what?
Like-
I think you just helped me like contextualize my issue with Aang in this first episode, which is that he kind of just tells you what his character is, but he doesn't really show you. So he like explicitly says like, this is too much responsibility. on
Remember that
me.
monologue in the first 5 minutes?
A happy
I
child.
am doing a monologue. Now I look here to do this monologue. Again, I'm giving this child actor the benefit of the doubt. We are going to be nice.
No, it's not the child actor's
it's
fault.
not
It
even-
is the script's fault. But they
The script
literally
is
have in the
clunky.
script that he talks to Appa for 5 minutes about everything he's like has on the weight of his world. I'm like, wow, this is really telegraphed. It's not even the actor's fault. And what I do find interesting, also another concept, is that I didn't really feel like the Avatar part being that important in this episode.
Which
Because
it
again, like a
needs to
big
be.
part. Yeah, and the big part of season 1, because I believe he learns water bending first because of Katara. Again, I don't remember, but he remembers.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So like that's not even really a part in this episode. Again, maybe as the season goes on, it is, but it's like I kind of forgot he was the Avatar. I kind of forgot that was a part of this show.
And there needs to be, like, his connection with the Avatar state should be very difficult to access and very scary. Like,
Yeah, it
should
was
be
very
terrifying
easy.
for him. Because if you think about season 1, there's only a real, like, I'm like, okay, if you've got only so long for season 1, there's only a couple really big things in there you need to get into this season. You need to get in him learning waterbending, so he's going to go to the northern water tribe. He's going to meet Yue and Katara and Sokka. That whole journey, that's part of it. Going to Ba Sing Se and meeting Boomy, that's part of it. The Blue Spirit episode where Zuko saves him, that's part of it.
Yes.
And then the Kyoshi warriors. And then the last one is him finding the Chi Master, where he learns to master his Chi so that he can become, to register the Avatar state. Like, those are the things that need to happen in this. And we're already on the way to some of them. And I'm like, we've only had one episode. So it's just,
yeah, I struggle with I struggle with the length of the episode order. And I know this is like all modern TV now. Everything's like 8 to 10 episodes, especially if it's more expensive.
Especially if it's on Netflix.
Especially if it's on Netflix. Or like any streaming service, it feels like. And it's tough because I think what you lose is the ability for a story to breathe and for characters to just kind of exist in the world. And it's just so tough when you're like, I've got, 15 story beats I got to squeeze into 8 episodes. So like nobody's taken a second to, have established those characters or get that kind of character growth that you can get when you have, a couple more episodes. You have, God forbid, a filler episode or two where like the characters just hang out. Like that just doesn't really happen anymore in modern TV. And I kind of miss it.
Yeah,
and I 100% agree, because again, this show, and why I think all three of us enjoy this show, is that it is a show about mythology, but I never felt like that was the most important part. It really is about the character development. It's about the characters, and it's disappointing that they don't let that breathe, and hopefully as the show goes on, because again, Danny has kind of reassured us, is like, all right, like give it the 8 episodes, let's give it time.
So I think that's kind of a good point to start wrapping up our conversation about the show, because
you guys will be reviewing the rest of it too.
We're going to be watching the rest of it. So we are going to be watching the rest of it. So how about this, Morgan and Kat? What do you guys want to see from the rest of the series? And then once we watch it, Morgan, you and I can talk about whether or not, God, I sound like I'm doing like an annual review. We can discuss whether or not those goals have
on
been
that
met.
Zoom.
We're gonna sit down and we're gonna really see if you hit those goals, if you hit your KPIs.
Did you meet your milestones?
Did you meet your milestones? Did you Avatar? Did you meet your milestones for the year? This is your annual review.
I don't know if they did or not, but we will find out. I'm gonna have an answer that's, I think, very different from you guys. I think if they're gonna make a change, I hope it's really impactful for the show, because I am a fan of making changes and adaptations. I think that's the only way to make it interesting. But if you make a change, make it matter and make it, I won't say better than the original, but make it interesting.
So Morgan, what do you want to see from the rest of the series?
That's a good question. I like Kat's answer. I think character development, because I already kind of know where the story is going. So in that aspect, like I already know what direction we're driving towards. So I really want to see them take time to like establish the characters, make us care about like the characters, because I already care about them in the animation, but the live action's a little different, and I don't want to like bring in all that baggage from the animation, be like, of course I love Zuko, or of course I love Sokka, or of course I love Katara, or whatever. I think that they need to like earn us caring about these characters, and especially given some of the tweaks that they made to some stuff in the first episode. It makes me interested to see where they're going to take all these characters through the rest of the season, and how those like growth arcs are going to go with those characters. Weirdly enough, I have faith that they're going to do Zuko well.
Yes.
But I have less faith about how they're going to do like Aang.
100%.
So yeah, like Zuko. Well, I think I don't want to say Zuko's an easy one, but like it's kind of like a common trope.
But also he's such a fan favorite, so I feel like maybe they put a lot of pressure on it.
Yeah,
like, how do you? We gotta at least get Zuko right.
If you mess up Zuko, everyone's gonna kill you. So,
I think for me, kind of to go to your point, Kat, if they're gonna make changes, I would like to see an expansion of the world. Mm-hmm. If they decide to make changes, I'd like to see additions. I would love to see what is going on in the Fire Palace right now. What is Azula doing? What is Ozai doing? Like, what's going on through the heads of the rest of the nation the rest of the nations as they learn that Aang comes to pass? So
because you only really get it from Aang's point of view a lot of the season. So I agree. Yeah.
And you very rarely see Azula or Ozai in their normal setting besides flashbacks with Zuko.
That's true.
I would like them to, if they're going to expand, I would like to see more of the world explored. Like, if you're going to add something and make it matter.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a great one. And I honestly hope that they do something a little bit different. Like, obviously they're going to follow like the path of season 1. But I hope they bring something new to the story.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's going to wrap it up for us. Overall, give your final thoughts on the episode and share your favorite thing and your least favorite thing. Doesn't have to be big, doesn't have to be dramatic. Just what was your favorite thing and your least favorite thing from the episode? Morgan, you can go first, or do you want me to go first?
You go first. I'm still thinking about it.
I would say that overall, I enjoyed myself watching this episode. I think we've kind of talked about the things that made, certain changes more difficult to follow, or where it was more challenging for us to watch it. I think my least favorite thing was Aang choosing not to leave the Air Nation in fear. I think that is a major part of his character development, because that guilt drives him through most of the series, and I'm bummed that we didn't get that. I think my favorite thing is the way that they have depicted Zuko. You get him for a very short amount of time, and I think Zuko is depicted exactly as he needs to be. Because let's be honest, he's a little obnoxious in that first episode. Mr. I've got so much rage and need to find my destiny because I'm the heir to the throne. I thought they did that great. So I think Zuko was the strong point, and I think that that change with Aang was the weak point for me. What about you, Morgan, or Kat, whoever wants to go next?
I can go.
Morgan, you go.
So yeah, overall, I liked it. I thought it was enjoyable. I know we talked about this a lot, but like, yeah, it was kind of middle of the road, honestly, in terms of like a pilot. But you know what? I'm excited to see what the rest of the season looks like. I still kind of struggle with like, who's this for? Why is it necessary? But it's not an offensive adaptation like the M. Night Shyamalan one. It's it's doing what it's doing. And I'm excited to see more of the season. So I know that we ragged on it a little bit, but I overall liked it. I had a good time, and I actually had to stop myself from watching episode 2 today, because I was like, oh my God, then I'll just like pollute my thoughts with like what happens in episode 2. So for my least favorite, I'll start there. My least favorite is Aang basically just monologuing his character journey like at the camera, essentially. I thought that was I sympathize with the problem of trying to like, establish him and like start to give him a character arc, but I don't think that having him just like turn to the camera and explicitly say like, I was happy when I was carefree, and now that I have responsibilities, I don't like it. Like, there's got to be a better way to do that than have him like, have a 5-minute monologue to Appa. Like, that's just lazy. And then my favorite thing, I think, was either the rescue at the end, which I thought was really fun, and like a really fun action set piece. Or Sokka, honestly, as much as I love Zuko, and I think he's going to end up being my favorite at the end of the season, just kind of like he was in the show. But I think Sokka kind of like stole the show in this pilot. I think he was like the most fun character, kind of came most alive when he was on screen. I think the actor did like a really good job.
Morgan,
yeah, I mean,
sorry, Kat.
Morgan again.
And now it's my
all
turn.
twice. No, I agree. I'm like middle of the road on what the pilot gave, but it's one of the only pilot pods we've had where I was like, well, I'm definitely gonna watch episode 2, so I gotta see where it goes. So there you go.
That's true.
That doesn't happen very often, so I do want to see where it goes and see where the conversations go. And yeah, favorite thing I would say is probably, I agree. I think Sokka's humor was my favorite. I think he landed the lines well, and I think that's hard with jokes that might have been told already. So I think he did a good job with that. And then least favorite part was how dark it was. I couldn't see. So that was the first thing I noticed. It's the thing that continues to bother me. But yeah, I will watch more. I know it was interesting because, again, usually these pilot pods, I do not watch more of the show. And I stated, I won't be giving my opinion like I wasn't watching more of it. But no, if you guys didn't watch our last episode, it's because I'll be at Emerald City Comic Con. And I will not be here while the girls record. So that's the reason why that's the reason why we did a pilot pod, actually. Yeah. That way I could talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, because otherwise we were just gonna do our Avatar episode without Kat. And I was like, no, we can't do this. Like these girls made me watch Avatar. Like
Rachel in the chat said that one of her favorite things was the music, and that acting aside, the casting has been good so far, which I do agree with. I think the casting has been really well done.
I
didn't notice the music at all. So I guess that says something.
I did, but I have thoughts. They brought in just enough of the theme music, but they did grow a lot of new music. There was just one point where I don't know why, but it was the sequence where Aang steps out of the village to protect Sokka, and he like steps in and he's like, save the day, where the Avatar theme starts playing, but it was muted, and it wasn't like muted, not physically muted on your TV. Like it just didn't quite hit as strong as it wanted to. And I was like, come on, guys, hit it harder. But that's just me being real picky. Like, if you're gonna go and play the Avatar theme, play it rough. Like, that's just me being picky. But otherwise, actually, Rachel, during the beginning, the Danny says I'm literally biting my tongue because I want to blurt out so much, meaning Danny knows stuff that's coming in the future. Rachel, I will say that the beginning section with the whole Air Nomads bit that we is not technically canon, that music was really well done. I think it was a really nice sweeping landscape. I was really
now it is canon.
That's true.
Canon. I mean, it was canon.
It's canon,
it was just
now.
Never visibly canon. All right, let us wrap up. Where are you guys gonna be? So, Kat, you're doing some Kickstarters. You're doing some Comic Cons. You're doing some stuff. Where are you gonna be? So
we are still doing Nightmare in Wonderland, which is our not safe work. Alice in Wonderland, Sleeping Beauty book. So go check that out. We're also gonna have our collection, A Slice of Life, which is about an anime character that comes to life and falls in love with a high school cheerleader. So that's launching on Monday. So just check out my Twitter @ComicUno if you want some stuff about that. And yeah, we're going to be at Emerald City Comic Con. So that's in Seattle. This is our first tabling at a West Coast show. So I've been to the West Coast many times. It's the first time we're actually like in an artist alley on the West Coast. So we're really excited about that.
That's awesome.
So we're going to be there for a while. It's a long show. It's a Thursday to Sunday show.
Oh wow, that is
long status.
Yeah, it's like a San Diego. It's a big show. So we're excited. I don't know if they'll be New York Comic Con level, but I've heard that this is like the best artist alley there is, and that they have Chris Evans that's gonna be there. It's like a lot of people.
Really?
There's like the whole Critical Role. People are gonna be
That's
there.
gonna be cool.
Let me see who else is gonna be there.
I'm sure my husband is jealous. He loves Critical Role.
He's gotta go to the West Coast and see him. Oh, actually, all the Avatar people are gonna be there too. So you have Mae Whitman, you have Donnie Bosco. So it's gonna be a good show.
So Morgan, what are you up to? Where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Mojotastic, and also as a co-host on Supergirl Radio, where we're still going through the Tomorrowverse DC animated movies, just still trying to desperately understand that the Crisis movie we watched recently. So we watched the Superman movie, and we watched a animated short that left me with a lot of more questions and answers about Adam Strange. And this week we are doing another one of those movies. I'm not saying the name of it because I cannot remember which one it is. But you know what? You when you tune in, that's when you're gonna find out. And we record Tuesday nights at 9 Eastern time. I was about to tell you Central time, and that's not true at all. 9 Eastern time. So if you want to go to
you move now. Yeah,
I keep moving back and forth between times. So if you want to come and find out what we're talking about, which animated movie, you should join us at the DC TV Podcast YouTube page.
And you guys can find me on Instagram, Amy_hip. That's Amy_HYP. You can also find this podcast on a bunch of different platforms, basically all of them. Google,
Patreon,
iTunes, Stitcher. We are on Patreon. If you would like to be able to join us live for these podcasts, join the chat. You can become a patron. It's patreon.com/thelegendaryladies. Email thelegendaryladies@gmail.com. Instagram, thelegendaryladies. TikTok, thelegendaryladies. Twitter, legends_podcast. Just a little.
We switch it up. And I think this is like a good segue, because the next episode, we are going to talk about the full season of Avatar. Now, a lot of people, including the people in our chat tonight, have already binged it and already watched it. So if that's you and you want to talk and tell us what you thought of the full season, email us, tweet us, DM us, let us know. And then we will read your feedback next week when we go through and talk about our feelings about the whole season. We might not look at it right away until we're done, but we'll definitely talk about it on the podcast.
And one thing that I would like to pose for anyone who's listening to this podcast, maybe they've never listened to any of our other stuff before, we really do love hearing your thoughts, because we have our own little bubbles. I would love to hear from someone who has only watched this.
Yes, I would actually also love that.
The animated series, because when I was watching this, or when I was driving home from work this evening, I was like, I don't know if I had not had the source material, I don't know if I would actually like any of the characters.
No.
Like, I don't know if I would actually be in for the long haul.
So I think it's funny. I think if I hadn't watched the source material, I don't think I would be as hard on it as I am now. And I might just be like, this is awesome. You know what I mean? Like, I might just be like, this is just really great. I think it's knowing the source material that is making me so like judgmental. Like, that's not what they did in the animated.
This is a really good question for Rachel. Are we going to do a Winona Earp pilot pod? And
Rachel, you're so smart. We actually have already talked about that, because there was the news recently that came out that Winona Earp is getting like a special, basically kind of like a TV movie on Tubi. I think that's how you Tubby. I don't know.
I think it's Tubi.
Tubby. I call him Tubby. But on Tubi. So we are planning on doing a Winona Earp pilot pod, which I'm excited about, because Kat, I think you've seen it.
I have, yeah. No, I've seen most of the show, but I don't think I saw the final season.
I also didn't see I think about half of the final season.
Yeah.
Which makes me a very bad Winona Earp fan, because I was like a super fan like early on, and then just kind of like got lost and was like need to go back. So I'm actually planning on doing a rewatch. So probably when
nice.
we start doing the pilot pod, I'll just continue on. But
Which I think just that way you guys prepare for your, give your emails. I think it's going to be after Avatar, unless like some
Yeah.
news pops up for
Yes.
like another thing. It will most likely be after the full season of Avatar.
so if you want to send us your Winona Earp pilot thoughts, I mean, now's a great time for that too, because that's going to be what we have up next, I think.
You read our minds, Rachel.
Rachel also hasn't finished the last season. I feel like this has become like a bad thing of mine where like I love something really hard and then I never finish the last season, like Orphan Black.
Granted, though, from what I remember, there was a really big gap between the season before that and the last season. I think that's why I didn't watch it.
I think it was like almost a 2-year gap, and I think that's why when it came back, I was like, oh no, I need to get back to this, and then I just kind of didn't, but. It's hard when some of these shows keep doing these gaps though, like 2 years before they come back. It's like by the time they come back, I don't remember them.
And Amy, I think you're going to love this show. I think you're gonna like it. Oh my God. You're gonna love, I forget the mustache. Doc, I think his name is. You're gonna love Mustache.
Yes.
There's definitely, I understand and respect the cultural phenomenon that is Winona Earp. I remember one year it was really big at Comic-Con. And Morgan, you were at this party. There was an NBC Winona Earp party that had no food. Remember that? And everyone was angry because there was no food. It was the one where Sarah and I did the
I thought that was the NBC party, and like the Winona Earp party was like in a basement somewhere.
That makes more sense.
Oh, you're right. No, the NBC party had no food. The Winona Earp party was wicked awesome.
I just remember it because like we were in like a group talking, and somebody touched me to like move past me, and I turned around to be like, "What?" And it was like one of the Impractical Joker guys, and he was like, "Sorry, just going past." And I was like, "What is happening right now?"
I remember that. No, yeah, that was.
You're in like a dank basement. That Winona Earp didn't have I could understand because Winona Earp wouldn't have had money for food, but it also didn't have money for like natural light. We were in a basement for sure.
or placement, really.
It was really
it was like the Avatar pilot. It was really dark.
It was thematic. All right. So I think that's going to wrap up our discussion. But again, please do send us your thoughts. We'd love to read them. We'd love to share them. Comment on the YouTube post. Send us a Instagram message. We love to hear from listeners. We thank you so much for joining us. Again, we are the Legendary Ladies podcast. Thank you so much for joining us this week, and stay legendary.